Good afternoon. I'm Spot On Weather Meteorologist Matthew Euler, and today we're going to talk about the long-range outlook. We'll have a nice long-range discussion. All right, so what I'm going to start my long range is basically Monday, 5 December in this video segment. And again, as I have done in past videos, I'm going to take a look at the 300 millibar chart on the left and the 850 millibar chart on the right. And the purpose of the 300 millibar chart, it's approximately 30,000 feet above the Earth's surface, and the primary purpose of that chart is to identify the jet stream. And the main area of the jet stream can be identified by the tightest packing of these height contours. That's generally the middle of where the jet stream resides. And so we're very much interested in the jet stream, so it helps us to determine warmer, colder periods, storm tracks, those type of things. And on the right, I have an 850 millibar chart, and that's at about 5,000 feet altitude above the Earth's surface. So generally, the bottom scale here, we have temperatures denoted. All right, we have the purples, the dark blues, purples, and the maroons and reds. Those are very cold air masses. The greens, the yellows, the oranges, those are all warmer air masses. All right? So now let's go ahead and talk about what's going on with these charts. 5 December, next Monday, we have a very meridional pattern still. What does that mean? That means we have a lot of waviness to the jet stream. So as we go to next Monday, we have a strong area of higher wind speeds as denoted by the bottom scale here, 130 to 140 knot jet maximum moving through the jet stream, digging out a trough of low pressure over the U.S. West Coast. Then that becomes a ridge up over the northern plains, and then a little bit of troughing again over the eastern United States. So most of the cold air at this point in time is going to be generally up north of the main axis of the polar front jet stream. All of it's going to be primarily residing into Canada. It's going to start spilling in. As you can see here by the temperatures in the 850, colder air is going to start spilling into Montana, to the Dakotas, those areas in the base of this trough. Right, so it's a very meridional or wavy type jet stream pattern again next Monday, and that's been the persistence. Basically, that's been what we've been seeing. It's been a really persistent pattern for the last 2 to 3 weeks. Over southeastern Virginia next Monday, we're looking at seasonal type temperatures with highs in the 50s based on what the temperatures will be at about 5,000 feet above the ground. Moving on to the forecast value next Wednesday, 7 December, the trough of low pressure moving into the west coast in the previous slide, that moves generally east. A little bit of ridging develops in its place. The trough of low pressure moves into the Intermountain West states, and there's a really strong area of higher wind speeds here by the yellows and orange colors, denoted by these colors, moving into the Panhandle of Texas, Kansas, Iowa, into Minnesota. And then we get this ridge of higher pressure next Wednesday over the East Coast, over southeastern Virginia. And as a result, look at the positioning of the polar front jet and look at the temperatures at 5,000 feet. Much colder air starts moving into the base of this trough further south, and now it's advanced further south from the last slide into Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, and Montana is really, really cold at this point. Meanwhile, over the East Coast and Southeast Virginia, we're looking at milder conditions, denoted by these green, lighter greens, darker green colors at 5,000 feet above the surface, 6 to 10 degrees Celsius temperatures. So we're going to have a warm up by middle of next week once again. All right, and then moving on further now, looking at the pattern for next Friday, 9 December. Now this is where things start getting really, really interesting. That trough that was over the Intermountain West for Wednesday, 7 December, has now pretty much flattened out to more zonal flow. There is a little bit of troughing off the U.S. Pacific Northwest, and then there's a deepening of the trough and a cyclonic turning of the winds in the jet around the base of this upper level low at that point in time next Friday. What does that mean? That means that the brunt of the coldest air is going to shift east, and with such a strong upper level low here at 5,000 feet and again at 30,000 feet, you're going to have much colder air trying to filter south. The counterclockwise circulation around that low is going to start bringing in much colder air, especially to New England area, the upper Midwest, and as far south as Southeast Virginia, believe it or not. So again, a very wavy jet stream pattern. Now let's take a look at the teleconnections forecasts. The Arctic Oscillation. We see that the persistence has been for a negative trend to the Arctic Oscillation. It's going to go slightly positive by the middle of December, neutral to slightly positive. And then I just wanted to show you the Arctic Oscillation. This is the ensemble forecast, which shows a wide range in model solutions from going positive to going negative. So it's almost split the difference. Take your choice for the Arctic Oscillation. And then the North Atlantic Oscillation, that is also forecasted to go slightly positive. It's been fairly negative recently. However, it might go slightly positive at this point with the GFS forecast. More likely going to remain neutral out of anything. Here is the ensemble forecast model plots for the North Atlantic Oscillation, showing it. Most of the model plots, most of the members of this ensemble are showing the North Atlantic Oscillation to remain negative. So that's something to keep an eye on. Again, the North Atlantic Oscillation has to do more with blocking of Greenland. All right, and then the Madden-Julian Oscillation forecast. I have two forecasts here. I have the ensemble GFS on the left, and then I have the operational GFS on the right. All right, and what we're looking at over time, this green line right here, is we're moving back towards phase 1, all right, closer to phase 8 with this green line over time. And all these yellow lines here represent different ensemble members. But it looks like things are starting to pivot back towards phase 1, close to phase 8. Here's the operational, and it's doing the same thing. And that favors a colder pattern over the eastern United States. A La Nina update. This graphic here just showing you observed sea surface temperatures. Here's the scale in Celsius on the bottom. We do have a cooler area still over the equatorial east and central Pacific associated with the La Nina, but again, it's very weak. Here is sea surface temperature anomalies. You can see the blue shading here indicates cooler than normal water temperatures from the eastern Pacific to the central Pacific along the equator. They're running about -1, -0.5 to -1 below normal, which is not very much. And then sea surface temperature anomalies just showing you over the course of the months in the El Nino region, the Nino 3.4 index, looking at that, showing you cooler than normal water temperatures in the East Pacific associated with La Nina, as low as -0.7. But again, you see how it's not dipping very, very far down. The negative values on the lower part of this graphic here. All right, so I thought this was really interesting. Looking at day 10, in accordance with this morning's model runs, this graphic here is really interesting because there's a ton of Arctic air just sitting up here over the snow-covered grounds of northwestern Canada and northern Canada. And then we get this feature right here, this strong upper level low. All right, and the way this thing has really, really positioned itself near Hudson Bay, Canada, it really, really makes me wonder, is that a piece of the polar vortex breaking off? Now, it'll be interesting to watch to see if the models are persistent in this feature, but with the counterclockwise circulation around this kind of feature here, that will drag much colder air eventually down southeast from Canada into the lower 48 and possibly towards the United States East Coast towards southeast Virginia. So that's just something to keep an eye on. I went back and did some correlations. I did some comparisons of 2014 January timeframe, the polar vortex and what the charts had looked like. Here's an example of a chart right here. It shows you that the green and the lighter white colors here in the base of this trough is extremely cold Arctic air. So you can see how things are kind of similar in pattern. You see the tightly wound upper level low here. You see the positioning here, dragging colder air down much more there than obviously here. The orientation of the jet stream also here isn't quite perfectly aligned like it is here, where you had a huge ridge. In 2014, you had a huge ridge building on the west coast and then this deepening trough over the central and eastern United States. Now, in this case, our jet stream is, pretty much pivoting around the base of this low. Just as a reminder, I had threw a couple charts up here. This was November 14th to 16th, 2013. This is a more symmetrical polar vortex. So the polar vortex keeps, when it's strong like this, it keeps the colder air bottled up over the poles. However, if it becomes detached in any way, the polar vortex, as example, January 5th, 2014, then you can really get some Arctic air to spill southeastward. So again, yeah, I'm intrigued by this feature right there. I mean, I really am. We're going to have to keep an eye on it. Another thing you're not seeing here that you had back in 2014 is, in addition to the strong ridging off the west, you had a very strong cold high. So the funneling effect between the strong high and this very tight polar vortex type feature in 2014 had really funneled that cold air southeastward more readily. Something to keep an eye on. So the final long-range thoughts are this. Based on what we just looked at, the teleconnections, the AO, the NAO are neutral. Slightly positive for the AO. NAO is neutral to slightly negative. Overall, this still favors a colder than normal pattern for the United States East Coast and Southeast Virginia. The Madden-Julian oscillation has gone quieter lately. It's got quieter, but it is forecast, the direction is forecast to pivot back towards a phase 1 mainly, and a slightly on the edge of phase 8, which favors colder than normal pattern for the East Coast in the December, January, February timeframe. And after this weekend's cool down, where temperatures get back slightly below normal, temperatures are going to warm slightly from the 5th to the 7th of December next week. Probably going to get up to about 60 degrees during the daytime, possibly low 60s, before the next front moves through and colder air arrives. The development of that strong upper low is at the polar vortex. The way it's positioning itself near Hudson Bay, Canada by 10 December, again, I'm interested in this feature to see what happens. So something to keep an eye on. And overall, we're still expecting a much colder air to invade the Midwest and eastern United States during the second week of December. Highs may only top out in the middle to upper 40s for southeastern Virginia, with lows in the upper 20s and lower 30s. It's going to get very cold, folks. It's looking more, the pattern is just looking colder and colder with every passing day. And the pattern will favor more cold temperatures again this winter, with very brief warming trends resulting in overall below normal temperatures beginning in December and lasting through February. More cold than warm, some very brief mild periods, but nothing like we saw last year across southeast Virginia. All right, that wraps up the long-range discussion for today, 30 November. Again, feel free to check out our videos. We have a YouTube channel, our forecasts on Twitter, Facebook, as well as Instagram. All right, just remember, spot on weather. If we're not spot on, we're not doing it right. Have a great afternoon.